There is a sutta, a discourse, a teaching in the old source Pali texts that uses the same formulation of the Four Noble Truths, but uses it in relationship to views. For those of you who are interested in Pali texts, it's in what's called the Anguttara Nikaya. And in it, it's to use the same language of the Four Noble Truths, which is there's the truth of dukkha, but we translate as suffering. There's the truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the way leading to the end of suffering. And in this text, we have the exact same phrase, but they put in views. The word in Pali is ditti, views. There's the truth of views, the cause of views, that there is an ending of views and the way leading to ending views. And so we could view the path of liberation as one of liberating ourselves from views. So I want to spend a little time talking about what do we mean and what are views and why would it be a good idea to liberate them? Should we not have any views about anything? I don't think that's what it's saying. And mostly I want to speak today about the wisdom of the body. But I think a good doorway in would be on this topic of views. And I'm thinking about it because, well, let me read a quote here. This is attributed to the Buddha. Having released knots, a sage here in the world does not follow any faction when disputes arise. Calmed among those who are not calm, equanimous, he does not take up opinions, saying, let others take them up. I don't think we're going to and we want to give up all views or opinions. I don't think that would really make sense in so many ways. It's important. For example, I think we all have our ideas of what makes a good society. And I don't think you're going to throw that away. And even the idea of living in a way that creates less suffering in the world, that creates more well-being, more happiness in the world. To me, that's a universal truth, and you can just feel into the truth of it. But I don't know that everybody shares that view of what, say, a foundational purpose for one's life might be. I had an interesting discussion today with someone, and the topic came up of a particular, we had two different views about something. What the thing is isn't important, but about something that's widely accepted and believed that happened in the world, in our country, maybe about 50 years ago. And I believe it happened. And the person I was speaking with today, he's just as clear in his mind that it did not happen, that it was something that perhaps had been fabricated. Or maybe it was, I don't know, I don't want to put words in this person's mind, but maybe it was some kind of hoax, or somehow it was perpetrated on us, but it was being deceived maybe in some way. It didn't really happen. That person happens to be among us right now, and he's a friend of mine, and I don't, if I'm misrepresenting the words, I don't want to misrepresent him. But at the point that was interesting, and we both commented on this, was it's clear in both, the truth is clear in both of our minds. Clear as clear could be. And part of the discussion was, we actually did get back in a little bit of the back and forth. I'm not an expert in it, but I actually have looked into this one topic a little bit. He's much more versed in it than I am. So he'd probably win the debate. But I mentioned he mentioned a couple of things, and I came back and said, well, those have been kind of disproven. And then he came back and said, yeah, but then there's been other people who've come and looked at the disproving and disprove that. And I believe that either one of us could easily come to the other with a stack of proof that we're right. Easily, both of us could do that. I do think I'm right. But I don't actually know that. It is a view. There is a truth. But the point is that, he and I he's a guy I like. I've known a long time. It was great to reconnect after a long time. And we could just be friends, and we don't have to go to war with each other about it. We can hold our views. I don't think he's going to let go of his belief, but he was able to hold it with a more spacious attitude. It didn't have any effect on how he showed up in relationship with me. So, this sort of thing happens in the Buddhist Dharma world. There are more Dharma wars out there than you may think. And in fact, I want to read something from Jack Kornfield here. This is, some of you know my book on Samadhi, and I interviewed him here. And he said, here's what he said. So we were talking about, it's on Samadhi, so I was asking his opinions on the place of Samadhi, in the range of views. And he said, well, people think this and people think that. And then I said to him, well, of course, there are all those who say that, what Jack had just said, is well and good, but there really is a right way, a single right way that we do need to understand, that other paths might be good in certain ways, but they might actually not be leading to what the Buddha was talking about. And then Jack's answer was, here it is. He says, well, that's the conservative position. But in fact, if you go back to the old countries of Thailand and Burma and Sri Lanka, you can't get the Theravada masters themselves to agree. I have heard so many masters say, I teach the true way, right from the suttas, from the original. This is the real way the Buddha taught. I've heard a whole bunch of masters say that, and yet they contradicted one another when they said it. So I don't buy it. That's called ignorance. The real freedom is what Ajahn Chah understood. The real freedom is the freedom of letting go. It's not the freedom of clinging to what one believes is historically true, because what is historically true is this mandala of skillful means, and it's not just one way. And I really appreciated that perspective, and I thought it really got to the heart of what, from a Dharma perspective, we're talking about of when we let go around views and opinions. We're not talking about in the way I was talking about before, where we need to have ideas on what, say, a just society is. And the Buddha spoke about things like that in the ordinary, everyday sense of functioning together in a harmonious world, that kind of sense of right and wrong. The problem is we, as human beings, tend to go through life, this is what, from the Dharma perspective, with so many views and opinions that we may not even be conscious of how we're overlaying them onto our experience, so that it's filtered through that. And when that's not seen, then we literally create a reality for ourselves. And we don't even realize that it's self-created reality, and then we inhabit that. We kind of, incarnate into that, if you will, and live out of it in an unseen, unexamined way as if it's true. And so we can go through our whole lives. And what it does is it actually puts a kind of a wedge, a little, maybe invisible, or separation. We're a step away from reality, right? And so that's kind of the idea of freeing ourselves from views. So from a Dharma perspective, there's a couple of steps there. One is because in the very first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, step number one is what's called right. The word right view, when they use the word right, by the way, it is, the word in Pali is sama. And, you know, it was a little bit of an unfortunate translation, right, because in our minds it has the connotation of right versus wrong. That's not really the best way to understand it. The etymology of the word sama actually means, if you look it up in the Pali Text Society Pali English Dictionary, the real root meaning is to be connected in one with something. And it's just a beautiful feeling. So I think, well, what does that mean to be connected in one with? Well, to be in a harmonious relationship. And Andy Olinsky, who is a Pali scholar, once told me, which I liked, he said, his suggestion for, so if you go to a place like Spirit Rock, they have a mandala wheel, and they've translated as, instead of right, wise and skillful, which is really, I like a lot. And Andy Olinsky said he thought using the term right is fine if we hold it as the understanding of this is the right thing one might do if you want to get a certain result, not right versus wrong. So, for example, I'm not a golfer, but a few times in my life I've gone and gotten a golf lesson. I thought it might be fun to learn to play golf and just be peaceful walking out in the golf courses, and you know, but the thing is, it turned out I wasn't that into it, and it takes a fair amount to get enough skill so that it's like anything, you have to get a certain, it's like meditation actually, to get enough skill where it starts to flow kind of on its own. And so I didn't follow through, but I remember, you know, I had a certain idea of how to swing the club. I didn't have any skill. And the teacher was trying to teach me that the proper way, the right way, if you want to hit the ball straight, would be, so it's not a judgment of a right or wrong, but this is how one would hold the club in order to have a good shot. And so when we talk about right view or right anything of the Eightfold Path, it's like, well, this is how one should or would want to approach that element of it, even right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, all these elements, if you wanted to get a particular result that you're aiming for. So that's kind of the way to hold this. Well, right view then in the Eightfold Path has a couple of levels to it. We start with an intellectual understanding, and it is still holding to a view or an understanding, if you will, but that is more aligned with the general direction we want to head. And so that's a starting place for right view. And then ultimately right view shifts into kind of a wisdom also. So wrong view would be, for example, thinking that the way to ultimate happiness is collecting as many sense pleasures as you can, which actually can give a happiness in a right, we all know that in the moment. But from a Dharma perspective, it's not ultimately going to solve our problem in the human condition. And so a better view or more correct view would be to see that a more reliable way towards happiness is more in how we relate to the experience, not what the experience it is. Things like that, that's a shifting of our view. And then it becomes not an intellectual view or an attitude, but actually a direct experiential knowing or wisdom. And then finally, the idea is, what's it like to have let go of these views and opinions altogether? And what I mean by that is take away that invisible filter so our direct experience is not mediated through an unseen filter of views. That's really what I think we're ultimately aiming for. I bring this in because, as you'll see, I think it's a wonderful segue right into the power of the wisdom of the body. The body is a great opportunity to meet an unmediated direct experience. When you put your attention on your knee pain, that is reality. Now, we all know that we're going to fall into filtering it. I like it, I don't like it, but this is the practice. This is what, so we don't start with perfect view and have transcended view, but right there, it's such an accessible way to show us where we're suffering, and we let our suffering be our guide. As I've said many times, my suggestion, my recommendation is you don't need to go seeking suffering. Seek things that gladden your heart and mind and that nurture you and nourish you and everything. But just be receptive for all the times when life, your teacher, is going to bring you what you need in that moment. And so if you're sitting in meditation with whatever, your knee pain, obviously you want to know when to stretch your knee out to be wise and skillful and care for yourself. I once had someone who came to me and they had damaged their knee because they were on some retreat and they were having knee pain, and the teacher said, well, you don't need to stretch your knee out. What arrogance. Actually, I would say ignorance and arrogance yoked evenly together. Because from what the person said, that teacher, I said, don't even tell me the teacher's name, I don't want to know. Didn't investigate with the person to find, is it true? They just spit out a generic platitude, be with it. So they ended up damaging their knee. That's a view. They thought they were dispensing wisdom of practice. Sometimes we need to take care of ourselves, but we also want to be attuned to when maybe the time is, well, hold on a second, I don't know that I'm damaging my knee. Maybe I won't be so quick to stretch the knee out. Let me hang out here just a little bit with this pain. See where I'm at about it. Notice how, but it's not so easy to let go around it. I am putting a filter in here, which is, I don't like this. Yeah, I got a view and opinion. What, are you crazy? I don't want knee pain. Okay, fine. What is the teaching there now that that's what life is presenting you in that moment? So this is an idea, I want to explore this more about the potential of the body. The body's teaching us, yes, we're going to meet it with the overlay of our views, our perceptions, how we, which is the sort of the intermediary, the filter of our experience. But it's an opportunity to drop down below any concepts we have about it. Even right now, I want to just invite you to do a little experiment if you'd like. It's going to take like less than a minute. For those who wish, I invite you to take a few moments. You can have your eyes open, or if you want, close your eyes and bring your attention in just some way into your body. Just feel, maybe it's a general sense of the body. Maybe there is a specific experiences that are popping out to your awareness. And let yourself feel your breathing. Maybe put your attention into your arms, legs. If you're sitting, feel wherever you're, maybe your butt or your legs touching against a pillow or a chair. If you're lying down, maybe put your attention to your back. We're just connecting in with the feeling of your body. In between thoughts, notice that there's a space where the concept of arm, leg, back, yeah, you have an arm, a leg, and back. I'm not saying that, but as experience, it's just this unfolding change of experience. A tingling, a pressure, a warmth, a tightness, right? And so the whole concept of, that's a way to kind of get at an unmediated, direct reality. We're not going to lose the concept that we have a body, and you can't function in the world. Of course, you have to have the ordinary relationship and understanding, but connecting with the direct experience before we assemble it into something that we put meaning on, the body has a great opportunity. So I want to take a little time now and talk about this. So one of the things we've been talking about throughout this retreat is this idea of liberation through non-clinging. That's been kind of I'd say the foundational theme. And we've been talking about connecting with the parts of us that are good and right and that feel good and that gladden our hearts and minds. But also we want to come to understand what keeps us from being free. That's the focusing on the suffering side, right? And part of that is this word for insight that we call vipassana on the insight side of the practice. It means, we translate it as insight. The actual, if you tease apart the word, the pasana comes from this word pasati, to see. And the via has a kind of a feeling of like to pull apart. So for example, if there was a bunch of weeds growing in the ground and you wanted to see to the ground, you could put your hands in and kind of pull apart to see more clearly. So we translate it to see clearly or insight. And one way to think about what we're doing in our practice is, and this is an interesting place, sometimes our practice feels like we're going out. It's expansive. And there are spiritual traditions that's what it's all about. When I was first starting in my own practice, I was 18 years old and I lived in a yoga ashram for a couple of years, and it was more Hindu-oriented yoga tradition. And there they used different language than Buddhist language. They had, what the aim there was, they would say things like merging in one with God. That sounded pretty good to me. I could sign up for that. Or realizing you're the God within you, and that kind of language. And it was kind of this expanding out. And I think that's a powerful path for many people. For me, it had a hidden, I don't know if you'd say defilement, but a hidden problem there, because it's this idea you hear of a spiritual bypass. I thought I just wanted to go straight path to God. And in that ashram, the more blissed out you were, the better. They weren't worried about you being attached to it or clinging to it. It was like, go for it. So, okay, this is good. And problem is, it took me some time to realize that there was a lot that needed to be dealt with that was operative within me. I'm not saying this is how it is for everyone. Many people find that the path isn't necessarily out, but the path is in. Or you could say the way out is in. And some people experience it that way when they delve deeply into their own mind and body. It's really plumbing the depths of the nature of your own being, really. And of course, this is how we have the insights. What is the nature of our own being? Impermanence, emptiness, and all of that. But as you could say, this is again not traditional language, I think, but it's coming to know ourselves. It's self-knowledge, really, is one way to think about it. In service of the liberation through not clinging to any of it, right? We have to come to know these parts of ourselves that create suffering. If you ask most people, don't do this, but if you were to just go on the street and ask most people, if you know who you are, first they might think you're kind of crazy, but they would say, well, of course I know who I am. I'm this and I'm that. We mostly live on the surface appearance of things. And it's a great opportunity, like here on retreat and everything, to drop beneath the surface and to go to see what's more deeply true underneath it, and to really get at that, maybe I didn't really know myself. I knew this level, but, many of us, and I'll put myself at the head of the pack, don't know ourselves. Or we have a mistaken view. I'm this, or I'm that, or I can never do this, or I'm always doing that. That's a view too, by the way. And oftentimes, not only is it clean to a view, but for many of those views, especially the ones that tend to create suffering, like it's an identification with a kind of a suffering part of creating part of ourselves, we're the least qualified to make that judgment. I mean, you are, listen, let's be clear. Of course, you're the expert on the lived experience of your life. I'm not saying that. But what you make of it, the story you tell yourself, you're the least qualified because you're not objective. The story you tell is influenced by your filters. So part of what the body can help us do is unmask these filters of the stories we tell ourselves. And that is just an amazing way about what the opportunity of the body is. So let's talk about a few of the ways that the body can serve us. So first of all, think about your own experience on this retreat. I know it's a range of experiences, but I'll tell you what is common. I know many of you I've had a chance to speak with have shared what I'm about to say. Some of you I realize I haven't spoken with. You have your own experience. You sign up for the retreat. You come to sit down. Okay, I'm going to do the schedule. What is it we say to you? It's really amazing. You don't have to be in any particular posture. Lie down if you want. For me, I said, make the schedule your own. Here's the schedule to support you. If it doesn't support you, you optimize it for yourself. If you need to sleep, sleep. Eat when you need to. Let your body tell you. Follow your rhythm. That's not being lazy and blowing off the practice. That's just being wisely attuned to the flow of yourself, and then really be ardent and diligent and practice well. And you don't even have to make anything happen. You just are asked to sit and be mindful for whatever it is that is happening. That's it. Look how hard that can be sometimes, just to sit and be present with ourselves. I have to look the quote up. I don't remember the philosopher, but there's a famous philosopher who said something like, I've discovered that all of mankind's unhappiness comes from just one thing, not able to sit quietly with themselves in a room. So what happens is we come to sit down, and look, the suffering may come in your mind, may come in your body, but the present moment all of a sudden, and we can't do it. That's our teacher right there. That's the wisdom of the body teaching us right now. All the body's just being a body. Right? One of the things that you learn is that very quickly is you can't control the body. That's a great learning right there. Right? If you've got nothing else but to learn that you can influence causes and conditions, but you can't control the body. And that's a teaching about all of life. Right there is a wisdom in the body, because in case you haven't noticed, well, I know for myself, and this is getting worse as I'm getting older, some days I wake up, something just hurts for no obvious reason. The body just went right along doing what it does, right? And it didn't ask my opinion. And sometimes I think, God, what's going wrong? I remember when I started wearing glasses, reading glasses. It was in my 50s. I was actually told that I had made it pretty far, done pretty well to not need them until I was in my 50s. And I remember now, I don't think about it, but at the time I think I'd know better. I'm a Dharma practitioner, but I'm complaining and griping and like, God damn, where's my glasses? And I have to put them on and off. And these damn eyes, what's going on? And then finally, I realized, nothing's going on. This is what bodies do when they get older. That's teaching me. Right there, the wisdom of the body is saying, now, by the way, what I've noticed is every time I go to go look in the mirror in my bathroom, I stand there. I used to see myself young, strong. Now there's some old guy in there looking back at me. I look in the mirror and I think, who is that old guy? Who is that old man? What happened? Where'd my youth go? And as a wise, kind teacher, the body says back, and I say, well, what went wrong? And the teacher says, well, nothing went wrong. This is what happens in bodies. This is the truth of change and impermanence. And then it teaches me that if I cling, I suffer. And if I learn to let go, I don't suffer. It's, the Dharma is actually conceptually very simple. I would say sometimes it's almost confoundingly simple, because it could really be that so easy. But so this is the exploration for all of us. What happens when we bring our awareness to connect deeply within ourselves? Let it teach us. Find out the ways we create suffering and the ways to liberation. And we can do the experiment for ourselves. And so another thing about the body that's, first of all, I got to back up for a second. So when you find that you come to sit on retreat, or in any situation, you sit down, you realize it's challenging. And you think, we want to be careful. We don't want to fall into, gosh, he's right. I just sit down in this comfy chair or lie down on this foam pad, and I'm still suffering. If you ever find that happens, don't add a layer of judging, and let that be your teacher. That's actually a great gift to you. You don't have to look for that, but if that happens, the attitude that's helped me is to say, wow, well, I said I wanted to understand suffering and its cause. How do you understand anything? Well, when you're suffering, then you need to, it's experiential. So when some suffering comes, again, I'm not chasing it down. I wish you all have, the least suffering as possible. But all that you need will come. Maybe it feels sometimes like we get more than we need, okay. But it comes, and then let's use it, let the body teach us. And then it reminds me of the quote from, I think it was Ramana Maharshi, who said, I believe it was him, who said something like, seeking happiness while clinging to the body is like trying to cross a river on the back of a crocodile. I think the point is, a crocodile's not a reliable means for crossing a river, the back of a crocodile, and clinging to the body is not a reliable means for happiness. So many of us would say, well, of course that's true when life's impermanent. The whole teaching of the body helps us because we don't live our lives as if it's true. If you stay embodied, it's teaching you moment by moment. And it's not, again, if we can take those moments and not filter it, it's raw experience. And we get to learn, can I let this be? And when I can't let it be, then maybe I have to let that be. It just keeps teaching us, okay, this is what I have now. I can't let go around this and I'm going to suffer. And so maybe we have to hang out with it a little bit or do other means. So I want to bring in a piece that I mentioned briefly, I think it was yesterday, but I think it applies here also. I was talking about these two words that come up. I remember one of the Pali, but the other I don't remember. But in English, we use this word disenchanted and dispassionate. And I'm bringing it back in. Some of you may not have been here yesterday. So it's really important that, what does it mean then to become disenchanted with the body? It doesn't mean, disenchanted can kind of mean disappointed or let down. There is that connotation, but it's actually meaning to break the enchantment with the body. breaking the enchantment doesn't become a negative. We don't have to, there are practices that look for the revulsion in the body. You have to decide for yourself if those are useful for you. I'm wary of those kind of practices because I think they can easily be tinged with aversion. I think in the traditional sense, the idea is that it breaks the attachment to the beauty, if you will, the enchantment. So I can understand that. Joseph Goldstein once told me that, I think it was Bhante Gunaratna was at IMS in Barre, Massachusetts, and did a guided meditation on digestion. And he had people do a visualization of eating and the chewing and what happens in the mouth, and the food goes down the throat, and then what's happening in the stomach, and the whole process all the way through till elimination out on the other end. And Joseph said someone came to him and say, why does Bhante Gunaratna have so much aversion to the body? And Joseph's point to me was, he thought it was interesting that that's what came up for the person. And yet, all Bhante had people do was just do a matter of fact, with no agenda, just looking at the processes of digestion that's happening to us all the time, that we live with every moment. For that person, it brought up like the revulsion in the body. So that was an interesting place. I don't know, what happened with that person, if they were able to reflect on that. That's an example of, the body is not ugly or beautiful. Those are overlays about it. What's ugly and beautiful? And we all know that the ideas of beauty are, well established. They're culturally dependent, different eras and different cultures. So it's not like a fixed universal idea, right? So ugly, beautiful, and when we add those in, my experience has been mostly that they are liable to create more suffering in us, comparing mind, judging mind, all of that, rather than we can just let bodies be. There's also the teaching that comes to us from other bodies, the judging that comes in and seeing others. That's a teaching of the body also. Our views and opinions. For whatever it's worth, I'll offer that, as far as I can tell, physical appearance means nothing. Nothing. Personality means little. We want to put our attention on what's of much more deeply true about all of us. More of a, again, not traditional Theravada language, but more of an essence, if you will. Just the truth of the worthwhile of all of us as beings. Theravada tends not to talk about our inherent beauty. I'm bringing in things from other kind of traditions, but that can be, so I understand where Theravada is coming from and why. But it certainly can be an antidote to all this judging and opinion we do about our bodies, bodies of others, our own personalities. How do you relate to your own personality? Feel okay about it? Not so okay about it? How do you hold it? That's a place also to look at. It's not really in the body, but I think it's in the same vein of how we hold ourselves. And the views, the overlay we put on it, and the judgments. That's not to say we don't bring discernment to help us if there are aspects of how we show up that create difficulty. Of course, we want to learn from them and say, oh, wow, I do have this pattern. I do tend to be a certain way. Yeah, it's true. And also let ourselves be. We don't have to be our own worst enemy. So there is the part of our whole personality. So I just mentioned that because when I was saying that I feel like physical appearances just means nothing. I mean, it means something, but not of any real value, anything that's real. And then I said, well, in personality, little. I mean, it does mean something because it can affect how we create suffering. I understand that. I'm not saying of nothing, but even people who may have, for whatever reason, personalities that tend to create difficulty. I'll bet do they not still have deep foundational intentions, aspirations, wishes of to have a good heart and actually have a good heart? Right? And that speaks much more deeply true about what's real about us. So when we think like this, then we can start to adapt more of a friendly attitude for ourselves. Right? Another piece that I want to talk about, which is similar to what I just said about, it's kind of coming back to it, but there's this idea of, I was talking about living on the surface appearance of things. And there's the, and we look more deeply, part of that is this idea of uncovering parts of ourselves that had been hidden. That's a whole topic we could spend a lot of time on. In the service of liberation through non-clinging, it's not that you have to go uncovering things. I mentioned several times on this retreat that for some people, the freeing of their hearts and minds, really consciously they're aware that it's connected with some insights, realizations that they have. But that's not true for everyone. And for some people, the mind settles into kind of an equanimity and a non-reactivity. That's a liberated mind. That's where all of the important lists, when we talk about the 7 factors of enlightenment, the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 jhanas, all of these they culminate in equanimity. So one way you could formulate or express the kind of the end goal of the practice is a perfection of equanimity. Would be that would be okay for me, right? So part of what can serve us then is, and this is the other thing about the doorway in the body, it helps us uncovering the things I've been talking about, right? Just by putting our attention on the body, so we don't have to make a big project about it. So I'll offer a few thoughts I have on how we might approach working with the body so we can stay open, not only to be for the present with it to be able to receive its wisdom, but what will help us to be able to hear the wisdom it's giving us and be less liable to fall into the reactivity without even seeing it, right? One of the reasons I keep bringing up this topic of ease and relaxation is in some of the traditional ways, maybe back in the old days, that didn't get emphasized. It had more of a warrior spirit, I think, there. And I think the fear was if we emphasize the ease and relaxation part, people would tend to get lazy. And that still is a potential there. They say, well, I'm taking care of myself. I feel like, I don't feel like doing this, and my mind's telling me to do that. So that's the shadow side of it, for sure. So yes, that can happen. So we stay attuned to that the best we can, but mostly I've found that people tend to practice well when they can have a deep relaxation, because it brings in a sense of not only the non-reactivity, because they're not tied up in a knot, but it can bring a sense of the safety. I can care for myself. If I need to stretch my leg out, I can stretch it out. If I need to listen to myself, I can. And if we end up erring a little more, look, there's going to be times when something is happening and you need to, move or get away from it or stretch your knee out or whatever. And, you could have worked with it more. Okay, big deal. It happens. So you lost an opportunity. There'll be plenty more. There will be other times when the opposite happens, when you stay with something too long, maybe you damage your knee or whatever, and you create a lot of tension and suffering that didn't really serve you well, and you should have, it's not should have, but could have cared for yourself more. So we don't have to get it perfectly right. This is part of learning to trust our inner teacher, our inner knowing, and not worrying if you get it wrong or right. So I don't know if me saying it means anything, but if it does, I want to talk to that part of your brain that thinks you have to, let me, if I may, I'd like to speak with it for a moment, that thinks you have to get it right. Um, not only do you not have to get it right, but there's not really even a right or wrong. What the real right is letting yourself do the experiment to, if you're brave enough, feel in using your best intuition that you can. Make your best choice, your best sense. Why? Because it's just what you feel. And if you don't even know, just pick something and say, you know what, I'm picking that. I'm going to stretch the knee out. No, I'm going to sit with this longer. Or in all the aspects of life where there's choices, what kind of meditation practice am I going to do? Whatever. Do that. Let it give you feedback. Let the body teach you. Stay attuned, though, this is the trick, to what feedback you get. You have to be willing and receptive to make a mistake. Screw it up. And then say, oh, and then you don't beat yourself up, adding another layer of judgment and opinion and views. You just say, thank you, I just got a teaching. Wow, okay, well, that was pretty good. I don't trust myself that much. It's hard for me. I think I have to get it right or wrong, and I don't trust myself. So I did the experiment. Hey, it worked. That felt good. I'm gonna go with that. Maybe I can trust myself. Or, and you know what? I took the risk. I trusted myself. That didn't work. Okay, I learned. The world didn't blow up. I learned, and I can move forward. Letting the wisdom of your body, so you have to stay receptive in that way rather than automatically fall into the aversion. So just a few more, a few more things here. Well, maybe I'm done. I had a few notes here. Hang with me for just a minute. I have one more piece. Ultimately, everything we're doing here, it's not really about the body, it's about the mind, really, right? And I mentioned the other night about what we call the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And that, if you remember, there was, for example, the 3rd foundation was about being mindful of, we call them mind states, chitta, states of the heart and the mind. For example, it's not a body sensation. You're looking to see, is greed, hatred, and delusion present in your mind or not? And so I think U Tejaniya would be an example. I mentioned before, I know some about his practice, but I haven't really practiced in the style a lot, so I don't want to misrepresent it. But in essence, really he's putting his attention to knowing these mind states that filter our perception and go right to that. You could say, I don't know if he uses the word objects, but of what we're tending to with our awareness, right into the mind states themselves. And I know a number of people for whom that's been very powerful. But I know a lot of people also, it's harder to get a handle going right to the mental and kind of, where is it? I don't know. And it's just, for a lot of people, it's just not the doorway. And remember, I was bringing this idea in of holding ourselves, I think I said it maybe this morning, of it's like we have this goal or this beautiful inner, I like to call it the inner sanctuary, but it just sounds kind of poetic and nice, but there can be many ways in for each of us. So that's an example. Some people's doorway in is through directly into the mind. What we find when we put our attention on the body, yes, there are body sensations, but for many of us, really what it's all about, isn't it, is what it reveals, this is what I've been talking about how we're relating with those body experiences. And so that's unmasking what's going on and revealing in the mind. So ultimately, I think it's all going, it's a mental process, right? If you weren't alive, you're still a body, but it's all really in the mind. So the body then, the real power of it, I would say, is that it's got all the teachings of the truths of all existence are to be found in the body. it's directly accessible. And there are a lot of different ways to work with the body. I'm not getting into that here, but it's not just one way. So for those of us who find more challenge in one particular way, like maybe connecting with our breathing, but there'll be other ways to connect with the body, which is maybe body scans, or, you know, bringing good feelings through the body, or I can think of sound is really a body practice. There's a lot of things we could do. So I think it gives us a lot more choice points to find a way to be in an easeful, relaxed way, but also kind of immersed in present. So that's kind of, I guess, what I wanted to say. I appreciate your attention. And so then I'll leave just with kind of a question or to pose to you to explore for yourself. The potential of the Dharma is that the possibility of freedom is said to be there and in any moment, in any situation. And one way you can hold the relationship with the body is connecting with the body, and then depending on what it's giving you, you can just ask your question, the self question, what can I be with this? Just sometimes posing the question gives a little permission, and whatever answer you get is fine, but then it's like an inquiry of, you know, where is the freedom to be found? Is the freedom to be found here? That's what they say. The freedom is not about the experience, but it's in the letting go around whatever it is happening. And so we start to learn the places that we can find the freedom in the body, and the places we can't is also the place then that teaches us. And then, of course, that's when we bring in the investigation, the inquiry, the wisdom to learn, well, what's the block and all of that. So there's a few thoughts about working with the body. I hope it's been useful to you. And what I'd like to invite us to do is sit quietly just for a few moments, and then I'll ring a bell to end. So thank you for your kind attention. And I hope you enjoy as we're moving to a personal mealtime or personal self-directed time.